gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and man, I really appreciate you guys just carving out a little bit of time in your day to check the video out. And got a good video today, guys. I'm gonna talk about springtime cold fronts and sort of give you guys a strategy on how to deal with them, because man, springtime, the bass react more to cold fronts in the springtime than any other time of the year. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Guys, real quick before we get started, I just want to remind everybody and invite you guys to please swing by fishthemoment.com and check out our lake map breakdowns. I've been building the spring map breakdowns for all the lakes across the country. Man, we got a huge selection of spring breakdowns. So if you want to learn some good places on your favorite lake, or maybe some places you don't know about, you can check those out. And if we don't have one of the maps, you can book a virtual fishing lesson with me, and I can go over any lake that you want to across the country. And I'll put the Fish the Moment link in the description of this video. Much appreciated there. But dragging a little bit this morning, guys. This is the third practice day. I'm heading down to Grand Lake right now for the TOTA series practice, and I've been driving back and forth, which is a little over a 2-hour drive. So getting up every morning I've been getting up at, leaving at 5 o'clock, driving to the lake fishing, then driving back and taking care of the kids at night. So I'm dragging a little bit this morning, but I'd rather be at home at night than in a motel 2 hours away from home. So that's the plan on that. So anyway, guys, let's get into this cold front deal here. The reason I wanted to do this video is the fact that right now here at Grand Lake, we are in the process of going through a series of cold fronts. It's sort of abnormally cold right now, but it's also been warming up a little bit in the daytime. But over the last week, and even in the tournament, we have got cold fronts coming in one after the other. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about how to prepare for cold fronts and sort of what they do to them. So the reason why cold fronts are so impactful on the fish in the springtime of the year is that water temperatures are really fragile in the springtime. It's like when you have these weather systems come through, you may have a couple days where it's 10 degrees above normal, and then you'll get a couple days like it's supposed to be in the 20s all this week. It was 21 degrees when I left the house this morning, and then it's supposed to warm up to 65 tomorrow. So you've got these water temperature fluctuations that are going everywhere. And since the bass are beginning to move up a little bit shallower, the water temperatures can change. There could be like a 5 to 7 degree swing in water temperature in the springtime of the year in one day. And cold fronts affect the bass severely in that sense, because not only do they jack with the water temperature, but they also have a big change as far as the light intensity goes. And the light intensity combined with water clarity and water temperatures really do a lot to the fish. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the progression, what happens when a cold front comes through. Prior to a front coming through, you normally have like a falling barometric pressure. You traditionally have a predominant south wind, south or southwest wind. It's a little bit more humid, a little bit warmer. And in the springtime of the year, those are ideal conditions to catch bass in. Fish, they just get more active under those conditions. And what happens when you have a cold front move through, depending upon the severity of that cold front, it basically shuts fish off to some extent. Not to saying they don't bite, but it shuts them off and causes your approach to have to change a little bit. So usually what happens, let's talk about the typical cold front. Okay, say for example, you get a day, like today, it's supposed to be 55 or 60 degrees for high. It was cold this morning. And then we've got this cold front approaching, and the highs are going to be, maybe 10 to 15 degrees lower. And then also you're going to have a wind shift to the north, and you're going to have a rising barometric pressure, and you're going to have lower humidity, and you're going to have brighter sky conditions for the most part. Sometimes you got clouds immediately after the front, but sometimes you got a bluebird sky. What this does, it has an impact more on shallow fish than it does deep fish, but it also has an impact on deep fish to a certain extent. After a cold front comes through, let's talk about two different scenarios. Let's talk about maybe some little bit deeper suspended fish, and then let's talk a little bit about shallow fish. In the springtime of the year, in the pre-spawn, you still have a lot of fish that are in deeper water, and they're suspending some of them. After a cold front comes through, if you have a temperature drop and you have a light intensity increase, those fish will not chase as much as what they normally did before. It's like, say, the day before, prior to the front, you might be able to catch them good on a spinnerbait or a crankbait or a jerkbait or something like that. Then after the front comes through, the light intensity gets a little bit brighter. A lot of times those fish will not chase like they did before. And there's a difference between chasing and generating a reaction strike. The day before front, the fish may have been chasing to actively feed. And the day after front, those same fish may not be in a feeding mode, but you can still trigger those strikes through a reaction strike, basically by fishing a faster stop and go retrieve. But you can expect your results to be quite a bit lower. You're simply not gonna have as many bites. So you can still maintain the same techniques after a cold front happens when you're fishing a little bit deeper water and catch fish, but just your expectations are gonna be lowered. In a situation like that, you've got two different, trains of thought as far as approaches. You can either continue with your reaction baits, or you can slow down and fish something slower, like a jig or a football head jig, or, dragging something along the bottom like a swim bait or something like that is possibly one way to catch them. But the thing that I found out when I'm fishing a little bit deeper water with your reaction bait, I go to a color change. Because let's say, for example, you're catching them on, maybe some type of like a pearl or white-sided jerkbait prior to the front, because the light conditions are lower, humider, all this type of stuff. You might have to go to a little bit more subtle color, like more of a translucent type shad after that cold front comes through, because the light intensity is greater, fish are not quite as aggressive, they're a little bit more spooky. And sometimes by going to a little bit more finessey approach as far as your color selection, you can trigger those fish into biting. That's the deeper fish. Now the shallow fish are a lot more severely affected by it. If you get these nights like we have right now where it's in the 20s and you've got some fish that are saying less than 4 foot of water, and say you're catching them on a square bill crankbait or a chatterbait or spinnerbait or something like that, those fish are going to be impacted a lot more. And what you're going to have is those fish in that shallow water may still be there, but they get a lot more inactive than the bass that are out in a little bit deeper water. And even though they're still there, they're harder to trigger with your reaction strike. The thing that happens after a cold front passes through for shallow fish in the springtime, if the water temperature is like in the upper 40s to mid 50s or something like that, is you have smaller windows where those fish bite. Let's say, for example, if you're out on a nice spring day, the bite window, if you're catching them on a chatterbait, you might be able to catch them all day long. After that cold front comes through and that water temperature drops significantly and the skylight gets brighter, your bite window may be like from, say, 12 o'clock until 2:30. Those fish are still going to bite at some point of the day, but it's usually more up in the mid part of the day, and your bite definitely is going to go way downhill. Shallow water fish after a cold front in the spring are the most severely impacted fish on any fishery like that. Now, there may be some exceptions, like if you're fishing over aquatic vegetation, because the fish that live in grass are different than fish that live on rocks or on sand or around wood. They don't react the same after a cold front. Grass fish grass fish are not as affected by cold fronts as fish that are in open water, wood, or rock structure. So the main thing, after a front comes through in the springtime, guys, you're going to have to lower your expectation. I'm not saying you can't catch them, but your bite windows are going to be smaller, your window of opportunity is going to be smaller, and normally you're going to have to make some type of an adjustment. And that adjustment is usually downsizing your lure. It's usually going to more natural colors a little bit, not quite so gaudy or bright, and just grinding away at them, because the cold front in the springtime of the year is not a good thing. I can promise you right now. Always makes fishing tougher. So we'll see this week, because we're going to have the same conditions at the tournament this week. So I'll let you guys know how it goes. We'll talk later.